Alright guys, so we finally did it. We fished the Bassmaster Classic. Let's talk about what it was like, and let's talk about some of the baits that were absolutely critical for me out there on the water. So first of all, the experience is absolutely insane. If you've never been to a Classic, you really need to go just for the sole part of actually going to it. I'd never been to one, so this whole experience was completely new to me. It was a week-and-a-half long adventure. We had 3 days of unofficial practice a week before the event actually even started, which blows my mind because from the time of practice, the last day of practice that we had, the water temp was 51 degrees. The first day of the tournament was 56 degrees. And for those of you guys that follow along with the channel, you know that's a big temperature change, especially in the springtime. Those fish start doing a whole lot of things. And the water was low, and the fishing was really tough. In my 4 days of practice that we had, I never caught more than 3 keepers in a day. So I really didn't know what to expect, but going into the last day of practice, I kind of figured out a little bite on some docks. And so one of the first baits I want to talk about was a Z-Man jackhammer. Everybody knows how effective this bait is. I was fishing mine in a 1/2 ounce in a chartreuse and white color, and man, this bait just flat out gets bit whenever things get tough, especially in the springtime and especially on river systems. I was pairing that with a Z-Man diesel minnow, throwing that in a white as well. And one thing that I want to talk about is how I rotated that trailer upside down, because what that allowed me to do is get a ton of action out of that boot tail. What happens is that blade, as it's kicking, pushes water around the blade, and so if you put your swim bait trailer rigged normal ways, that doesn't get the water, it needs to really let that tail kick. And so that's why I rig it upside down. But that was what did the majority of my work on the first day. And then another bait that did a lot of work for me on the first day was a 6 cents Duke. This is a lipless crankbait, and what I was doing was targeting wind-blown points that were those fish were up there super shallow on rock, and yeah, anywhere that wind was crashing down, I'd fire that baby up there and yo-yo it, and those fish would knock slack into it. So it was a really cool bite, but the real key was just covering water. I really don't think I got bit in the same place twice. It was tough to duplicate any kind of a pattern or replicate anything. You really just had to run new water and just keep covering water and try to honestly scrap everything that we had learned about in practice and just run the conditions that you were facing with that day. Because in practice, I got most of my bites on a 6 cents provoke. It's a jerkbait, and I was throwing that around everything and getting bit, but in the tournament, I didn't weigh one fish on a jerkbait. I think I caught a couple short fish, but there was nothing really that was helping me out with that. As that water was warming, those fish were pushing shallow, and everything was really getting tougher. So after the first day, I was sitting in 20th place, and then so going into day 2, I was like, we have a chance to make the cut. This is going to be super cool. And I started running my same dock deal with that jackhammer, and for the first 2 days of the tournament, I was the first person to catch a fish. So technically, I was leading unofficially the Bassmaster Classic for like 10 minutes the first day. So I'm going to chalk that up on the resume, right? And so I did the same thing the second day, started running some docks, got 3 nice bites right away. By 10 o'clock, I had 3 solid fish for like 8 pounds. And then I honestly just couldn't get any more bites. It was so tough. And so I stayed up in the river trying to fish some stuff up the river, trying to get bit. And man, I just couldn't do it. It was not working out for me. God did not have it in the cards that day. So I only ended up weighing 3 fish in. And so I managed to squeak in 20th place going into the cut. So I made the final day cut, which was pretty cool all in itself, just being there. And the third day is where you want to be there because the crowd is even more insane. We had 7,000 plus people at takeoff in the morning, where there was all kinds of people having you sign autographs, taking your picture, doing interviews. It was nuts. And so then going into the third day, I knew I needed to scrap everything that I had learned because it wasn't working, right? So I started out in the morning fishing some of the similar docks that I had been fishing up the river because it was cooler in the morning and I knew those shallow fish probably weren't going to fire right away. And so I tried that and it didn't work. And then what I honestly ended up doing was getting on a big mud flat outside of a major creek and throwing a Z-Man SMH worm on a drop shot and just around isolated pieces of cover. And I went to the first one. I hadn't fished them all practice. I went to the first one, pitched the first one and caught a 2.5 pounder and was like, sweet, you know? So then I ran to another one and got another bite that was a keeper, fished some laydowns with a jig, caught some fish there, throwing that Z-Man power finesse jig on some laydowns, caught a couple nice keepers there. And then toward the end of the day, I got back into a pocket that had some water coming in and there was an isolated log in the back. and I threw that 6 cents finesse F4 over top of that baby, and bam, caught a 4-pounder. And that really started to turn my day around. Ran another pocket that had the same thing, caught another keeper, ran a couple more pockets, caught a couple more short fish, and then it was really time to get back. So started making my way back, and you know, I had the second biggest bag of the last day. I moved up 7 places, ended up in 13th overall, which was absolutely insane. And hopefully it got me some recognition in the sport, you guys. It really solidified to me that this is where I belong. This is a tough journey. We fish a lot of places that I've never been, and I fish a lot of anglers who've been doing it a lot longer than I have. So there's a lot of unknown variables that go into this, but it truly was an eye-opening experience. And so some of the gear that I want to talk about that I threw these baits on was I caught most of my fish on that Z-Man jackhammer. I throw that on an Arc Invoker Pro 7.4 medium heavy regular. That is my favorite chatterbait rod ever. By far, it has a perfect mix between a soft action and a heavy backbone to be able to jack those fish. And I didn't lose a single fish on a chatterbait. I did lose one, but it got hooked on a rope. And that was different. And it was a little fish, so it doesn't matter. And then the throwing that SMH worm, that was a 7-foot 2-inch Arc Essence medium action spinning rod. It was fast action, and yeah, I didn't lose a single fish on that. And that Trokar Dropshot hook was super, super key for me on there. It's a finesse worm hook, and every single fish I hooked on that, man, they had it buried in the roof of their mouth, and they were not coming off. So that was super, super cool for me to actually be able to put some of that stuff to use. Trokar's a new sponsor of mine. Super excited to have them on board. Those guys are super awesome, and they were able to get me a lot of stuff at the last minute before I was able to get down to Tennessee. So super thankful to have those guys on board. And then I was throwing that 6 cents, what was the name of that bait? That Duke, that 6 cents Duke, I always forget the name of that, on a 7-foot 2-inch medium action bait casting Arc Invoker Pro. And I was throwing all those with P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbons, best line out there in my opinion. The moving baits was throwing on 15, the Dropshot on 10. And I was pairing that with P-Line TCB braid and 30 pound. Just as a, or not 30 pound, 15 pound on my spinning rod. And those combinations, guys, really did me. Like I said, I lost one fish and it got hooked on a rope. I fished super clean. I didn't have any problems with any of my gear. Those Shimano reels, as everybody knows, are super amazing. They ran super smooth. I had no issues whatsoever. Those Trokar hooks kept everything pinned. And guys, it was honestly an amazing event. God was definitely with me there. You could feel his presence everywhere. And there's just nothing like it. To see that kind of environment where there was that many people around, and it was really like what Dave Mercer said, it was a fishing party. It was so cool to walk down the street and have people understand the sport around me, and have so many people understand it and be signing autographs for kids and seeing the future of this sport and just seeing the backbone of this sport was absolutely incredible, because it's something that we don't ever get to see. So, you know, I gotta give a huge shout out to Fish USA for making all that possible. The sweet boat wrap they had me get, and just being with me from day one. Guys, it's truly an incredible sport. Black Rifle Coffee Company, I don't know if you guys can see the shirt. They were there at the event giving out free coffee to everybody. They have been huge following me and supporting me, and I couldn't do any of this without every single one of those sponsors and every single one of you guys, my family. And honestly, God has truly been blessing me the last couple of months, as you guys know that have been following the channel. I've had a lot of really great success, and hopefully we can keep that going. I leave here in a week to go to Toledo Bend for a Bassmaster Open, where hopefully we can keep the dream alive, keep running it, and make that Elite Series next year, and hopefully win one of these Opens and get back to that Classic, because honestly guys, there is nothing like it. To roll up into a stadium like that, it was next level. But if you guys could hit that subscribe button to follow with the channel, support the content, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. God bless.